The Vuelta entering a breakaway phase, it seems, after the first rest day. And after Wout van Aert delivered spectacularly into Bayona, what would be the mood for stage 11? Big question. 167 kilometres, over 3,000 metres of altitude gain yet again on the cards. It was going to be a tough day, and one that would surely draw out an enormous breakaway. Well, it had taken 30 kilometres to establish on stage 10. How long on this day, with 3 loops, one large one followed by 2 of a central medium-sized loop, and then a small final kicker of a loop, including a very nasty, spiteful Category 3 test, more of a wall than a climb at the very end. Well, so many teams are now starting to lose options as to get somebody in the breakaway. You can always rely on Campenaerts, however, to start proceedings rolling, and that's precisely what he did. Took a long time, though. Just over 57 kilometres before we had ourselves a breakaway established of any note. It really was difficult indeed to know just how many would get up the road. In the end, it was 38. That is huge. The arguments were rolling off the front of the peloton as the blockade was attempted on several occasions by Decathlon AG Tour Le Mondial. They, of course, trying to protect Ben O'Connor. And indeed, once that had been established, the fingers were starting to point at anyone who was thinking about making it up the road, including Christian Rodriguez of Arkea B&B Hotels, who really did have a strip torn off him. Well, settled down finally, and we got a gap that extended to over 6 minutes. But would such a large breakaway group remain cohesive? And the answer was no. Sandro Maurice pushed on. He was marshalled out there by Israel. Meanwhile, as you saw, Decathlon AG Tour Le Mondial were doing a job looking after Ben O'Connor, making sure that nothing silly happened. Well, out front, Caden Groves was starting to make inroads. Israel Premier Tech was starting to think about the potential for a stage win. They were arguing about work rate, and well, this cohesion of the breakaway was about to be shredded once again. Maurice was busy assembling Mountains points out there, nothing to challenge the Mountains jersey of Adam Yates. But really, this was going to be a break that had to break down. So in what incarnation? Well, first, straight out the back door, went 2 from Bora Hansgrohe, who had been implanted in the break. Wisdom, I guess you might say, from Primož Roglic and his Red Bull team. Well, how useful would those drop backs be? And what was the plan? Would Primož Roglic attack? Meanwhile, out front, Campenaerts was busy doing his job on the last of the day's climbs. A nasty, spiteful wall, only a categorised 3. Campenaerts soon folded over to Verona, Berardi and Zana, who kicked on. But really, our eyes were now further back down the course. And Primož Roglic, with help at hand, he was setting ablaze. Well, had Ben O'Connor and Decathlon AG Tour done enough to actually put the fires out? And the answer was no at this point. The gap started to open up. Ben O'Connor and the red jersey was left behind, with Mas teaming up with Roglic and pushing on to the gap that had been set by the break. A secondary gap then opening up, a crack becoming a fissure, and Ben O'Connor was under pressure. Mas and Roglic working together, with Mas with an idea of just enhancing his own podium place in this race, and maybe more, with much high ground still to come. Meanwhile, teammate of Roglic, Leibovitz, wearing the Young Riders classification jersey on the back wheel of course, Ben O'Connor, was not going to help out at all. Meanwhile, the Flamme Rouge beckoned for the breakaway, and guess who? Well, Irish eyes were certainly smiling at the end of today. Eddie Dunbar kicked off as maybe some of the faster men you'd expect on paper started looking at each other. He went to the opposite side of the road and made it happen. Biggest win of what's been a very difficult season so far for Eddie Dunbar. He loved it, and so did we. And then, of course, we started to look for the GC men, who would be coming across the line while Dunbar and the Jayco team celebrated roundly. Eyes back on the road, and Roglic was eating up those who'd been in the break, and indeed was teeing himself up for as big a gap as he possibly could muster against the red jersey of Ben O'Connor. As soon as he crossed the line, the clock started counting, and it was over 35 seconds the margin between them by the end of the day. Ben O'Connor driving it home, knew he'd been under the cosh for the entire time. Had his team, Decathlon AG Tour Le Mondial, done too much work through the stage? Hard to say. Hard to say what else he could have done. As for this man, Eddie Dunbar takes a stage win that will reignite his drive potentially to a top 10 in this Vuelta. Super work by him, finishing in front of Hermanspool, Narvaez and Barade. That was your top 5 on the day. But a look at the overall classification and things starting to chop and change as well. As Dunbar was taking his trophy, Ben O'Connor was busy thinking about what damage had been done today and how to moderate it going forward. 3 minutes and 16 is the gap now overall between the red jersey of O'Connor and Primož Roglič on the chase, with Mas moving up to 3rd place. Big uphill finish tomorrow. Let's take a look at it. Well, it looks reasonably flat from that kind of altimetry, but when you look at the profile, oh my life, there is no flat at all. It is climbing all day, and rather mean that there's only one categorized climb, and that comes at the very last. It's going to be stunning. Can't wait to get underway with stage 12.